Welcome to Things Musicians Don't Talk About with me, your host Hattie Butterworth. I'm a cellist and writer in my final year at the Royal College of Music in London, and I think we need a new way of talking. I've spent many years feeling in the dark about issues in the classical music profession. So often it can feel like you're the only person struggling with anxiety, depression, career doubts, money, injuries, and so much more. Who do we go to when we feel we've had enough for whatever reason? Join me and guests as we end the stigma with honest conversations about the things musicians don't talk about. Hello everybody, welcome back. I hope you're all really well and managing okay with what feels like an awful lot of change all the time. Is it just me, or are things constantly changing? But it's lovely to see that people are back performing again in different ways, and I really hope you're all enjoying having a nice summer, whatever that might be. So today I'm talking to Laura Armstrong, who is a cellist, and she previously studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London. And I've known Laura for a few years because we were at Chetham's School of Music together. So last October, Laura was actually involved in an accident that changed the course of her life as a cellist, sort of overnight. And today I'm talking to her about the accident and what it's meant. We speak about the rehabilitation process and the support she's received from friends and doctors and teachers. We also talk about grief and how asking for support is easier in a physical health crisis rather than in a time of mental stress. So I really hope this episode resonates with you, and thank you for all your support with the podcast so far. Please do keep sending your messages, your advice, your stories. I love hearing from you all, and yeah, I'm trying to grow the community as much as I can. I've been enjoying writing blogs as well. If you like to follow my blog, it's online on my website at hattiebutterworth.co.uk, and you can find it there. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and the podcast Instagram is at TMDTA podcast. So without further ado, let's introduce Laura and get on with the podcast. Hello Laura, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And just thought I'd ask, first of all, how's the last few months been for you?
Hi, it's been okay. Well, it's quite unusual time, isn't it? So just been trying to work out a way to kind of find a routine. I guess just getting used to being in my own company a lot, which is new. How has it been for you? Has it been alright?
Yeah, it's been a lot of ups and downs and getting used to things that I wasn't expecting to get used to, and you know, some things were easier, some things are more difficult. So it's just so strange. But I thought I'd start by just telling everyone how we met. I met Laura when she showed me around Chetham's School of Music, and I'll never forget. And you just had the most lovely way of showing me around and making me feel like this was the place I wanted to be. And you were just so like kind and lovely and honest. And yeah, I don't think I ever said that to you, but I just want to say now, thank you for being so lovely. So then you went on to be head girl at Chetham's, and you're in the year above me. And yeah, it's just, you're always there, always so supportive. And I think a lot of people will agree if they know you that you just, you're such a lovely, supportive person. So anyway,
that's very kind of you.
Today, Laura is going to talk to us a bit about her experience with an injury. And I was just wondering, Laura, if you could tell us a bit about yourself, what you're doing at the moment, and how your injury began.
Sure. Well, at the moment, I'm just starting to practice again and get used to playing. It's been a long time. It's been 8 months since I had an accident where I was run over by a lorry when I was cycling. So it wasn't the best morning of my life, but I had quite a lot of surgeries. I had an emergency surgery straight away to reattach my arm, and then another 17-hour surgery the day after with 12 amazing surgeons, which seemed like quite a lot to me. But so that was all not what I was expecting from this year. And that happened in October when it was like my third week as a master's student at the Royal College of Music. It's been an unusual time, but before that I went to academy to do my undergrad and learnt with Ben Hughes and Felix Schmidt. And before that, like Hattie said, I was at Chess.
I mean, during your undergrad, I was always seeing you doing some exciting project, whether it was with a singer or with a sort of folk band, and and with your piano trio. So you're such a sort of entrepreneurial person. And so I'm just wondering, you always seem to be creating such incredible projects. How did it feel then to have such a horrifying experience like that? I mean, I can't imagine anything worse to realise has just happened to you, so how did that feel to have your whole musical world just stopped?
It was, at first, it felt like the worst thing the possibility of never being able to play again was pretty bad. But I think with hindsight, it's given me more room to really understand that what I want to do is music, and there's nothing else that I want to do. I worked in a nursery for a few months, and it's been good to do some other things and explore how other people live their lives, because our job is quite unusual in the sense that we do spend so much time in a practice room and spend so much time working alone and mentally training ourselves. So to experience a bit more normal life has been quite useful, I think, for getting back into it.
And I was just wondering, when the accident happened and the sort of days and weeks after the initial event, what were the doctors telling you? I mean, were they saying there's a possibility you might never play again, or was it still very unknown?
It was very possible that I wouldn't play again because I severed one of my nerves, and there's 3 nerves which control our hands, and I'd completely severed one of those, so I couldn't move my thumb, first or second finger at all, and I had no feeling in those fingers as well. And on top of that, I'd had a fracture in the top of my arm which took 2 plates, so they needed to know whether that would heal. And I think I kind of knew that as soon as it happened, because I had to, when I woke up after the accident, I couldn't move my fingers at all, and that was a shock. But they were amazing, managing to put me back together again. Which is, I've never been more thankful for the NHS. But I think having really positive physiotherapists has really helped, actually, having that support, and also just friends who told me that it didn't matter if I couldn't play, because I don't think I really realized how much playing and playing the cello is. I'd associated my entire life with it, and it was me completely. So then having that taken away was kind of a shock. So having people say that it was okay, and they still wanted to, spend time with me, and for the person I was, I hadn't realized how much I'd put my personality into my instrument.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense, because I think, even the injury I suffered at Cheatham's, which was really short term, I think for me and for a lot of people listening will agree that just the thought of not being able to play again, or not being able to play at full capacity, you then realise through those emotions how much you are attached to it, and how much your worth is determined by your playing and your performing and the message you send to people through your instrument. And I was just wondering if you could talk a bit more about sort of what was the emotional impact of the injury on you. How long did it take for you to kind of get over the initial shock and realise and kind of come to peace with the fact that you might not play again? How long did that process take?
Well, I spent my first 2 weeks in intensive care, and during that time, it sounds strange, but the focus of playing disappeared. When it first happened, I was definitely I have to play again. But during my 2 weeks there, the realistic side of it was that I very nearly had my arm amputated. So that, being in that environment with really supportive nurses, I kind of went through a stage of being feeling incredibly lucky that I had an arm at all. And then the second stage was then okay, I need to come to terms with what I look like now, which is a bit different, and how that changes my everyday life. And then after that, I kind of worked out about the feeling that I couldn't play was more when I got home, which was after 3 weeks in hospital. So
Goodness, yeah.
I think probably a month and a half. But doing another job in January really helped me come to terms with the fact that I can do other things, despite being trained to do one thing my entire life, pretty much.
Because I have a vague memory. I really hope I haven't got you confused with somebody else, but I seem to remember that you told me, I think it was even on my tour of Cheatham's, you said that you had originally planned to be a doctor and taken that.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you kind of made the decision a bit later on and then redid your A-levels or something, or did a few years extra at Cheatham's, or did another, so it's sort of like you entered into the musical world for 5 years really intensely, and then it must have felt like, God, I made such a huge choice to become a musician. Now this is gone again. I mean, how was that, finding the thing you wanted to do and then it being cut off, even after you'd probably been through a lot of questioning with the whole medicine thing as well?
I think it was when I decided to do music, it was really it felt so much like the thing that I was supposed to be doing when I was younger, and I made that decision when I was 16. So I took an extra year at Chet's basically to practice, which was a really good decision for me then. And I think the fact that I'd never really wanted to do anything from that point onwards when I'd made the decision, it was a shock to then be like, I wonder what I should do now. But it was nice to have had an early, when I was at secondary school, having the space to have done other things, I don't know, you do the, I don't know, sports, or you do art, and you do all these other subjects, and not being completely focused on it when I was younger has helped this period of my life, because I now know that I can be interested in other things, and I think it probably will make me more balanced going forward. Hopefully, because it's not the end of the world if you play things wrong. And I think I definitely had that thing of overcompensating for and really taking things incredibly hard, when actually the perspective is that you can be interested in more things, and you don't have to have a sole focus to become a musician and have that as your livelihood.
I think what I keep thinking is what you were saying about your experience in intensive care, and how your focus was just, my goodness, I might not have an arm at all. I might not be able to live my life as I did before. And I suppose, if you see it like that, music is not something that actually we need in the sense of getting on with your life day to day. And it's interesting how musicians therefore act as if their instrument, sometimes they act as if their instrument is as important and is as much a part of them as a limb or something. I just wondered if you had a kind of idea, after all this experience, of why you think musicians are so attached, and why we put so much of our worth on the ability to play an instrument and don't tend to look to other things as easily as maybe some other professions do.
I think with playing, because we put so much of our lives into it, the time to practice and the emotion that we put into our playing, it really is an all-encompassing. Performing in front of an audience, it encompasses everything about you, doesn't it? Your physical ability and your dedication, and then a really massive emotional output. Similarly, how if you do an exam in something and you don't do so well, it's really difficult, but to hear critique of your musical voice can be really hard-hitting sometimes, because it is this combination of you as an entire person. If you know what I mean. I'm not sure.
No, it does. I do. And sort of even the ability to detach yourself from your instrument in that way then means that you can feel freer with your performing, I think. Because if you are so wrapped up in a mark, or in an achievement, or in sort of the entrance to an institution, or passing an exam in some way, if you're so attached to that, then it can be so hard to let go in a performance. I suppose if you're more whimsical about it, if it doesn't matter to you on the level of life or death, then
Yeah.
you have this newborn freedom, I suppose. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and I think it's like knowing that you have a choice, like your life is on a track at the moment, but things happen which you can't control, but then also having the choice of like you're choosing to do music so that you can give to other people and give them it. Gives such an emotional support to people. It's the only way that we can like talk without words, really. And then having that there, if you become I think it's hard if you do, we are encouraged to become very focused on perfection, but it's not possible. And if you're managing to communicate something beautiful, then you've kind of succeeded, which I feel like sometimes we don't always have the most positive experience during our classical musical education in particular, but other forms as well. And that can be really hard to like get your head around, especially like when you're younger in the process. And
I think a lot of people, if you ask a musician, this is what I'm thinking a lot now, is if you ask a musician what would be your worst case scenario, you know, your experience might be something that someone would mention, you know, having my arm hurt or having the possibility I might never play again. And I just think that that's so interesting, that that's such a big fear for people, because you're clearly showing that you never know with something like that. An accident might happen, anything might happen, and it might be all in all the best thing that could have happened to your playing or to yourself in general. And I just was wondering as well how you could explain like the rehabilitation process with playing again. When did you start playing again, and how much have you been able to play, and what does it blooming feel like? Like, it must be really weird.
it's quite strange. Yeah, I have I'm quite lucky because they put a nerve graft into my arm, which then your nerve grows down to, and at the moment I've got to the point where I can actually move my hand again, which is great, and all my fingers move, which is very exciting. And for that to happen was already a massive head start. But basically the way that I've gone about it so far, and I'm definitely in the middle of it still, the recovery kind of thing, has been that I would try and make sure that I at least tried to play every 2 weeks or so, just the act of trying. And because I knew that it would be hard to try and not succeed every time, so I just limited it to trying like once every few weeks. And eventually, since about 2 weeks ago, I can now like hold a bow, and I can't feel my fingers still, but I can move them enough to be able to play, and enough to be able to have, like, I had a consultation lesson, which was great, and hopefully start again at college in January.
So what did you do in your consultation lesson? How did you explain? Did you explain your situation, and did you play at all, or was it mainly a conversation?
Well, I explained beforehand in email, because I felt it would be, it's maybe a little bit unfair to turn up to a lesson with a professor and be like, hi, I can't actually play properly. So that was a good head start, and just to make it clear that I was hoping to kind of move forward with things, and that things should improve after this point. And then we talked at first, which was really good. Good to get everything explained clearly and all laid out, and then played as well, which was really great, and he's a very supportive person, so that was really great. And I think I was really nervous about it, because it was the first time I'd kind of like presented the possibility of playing again to a standard which I want, and also a standard which I need to be able to get back to do my masters. And that was hard, and I hadn't really realised, because I kind of thought like, from now on, whenever I play, I'll be just appreciating that I can play the instrument at all. I won't be nervous. That kind of thing. But it's amazing how quickly you can get used to being lucky again, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, goodness me. Was it really shocking to you the first time you played the cello again? Do you remember the moment where you first tried to play again? How did that feel? Was it upsetting, or was it just sort of interesting?
It was really made me very unhappy, because I don't have, at first, and I I can only bend my arm to 90 degrees at the moment, but it's a work in progress. So the first time playing just wasn't playing, really. I couldn't hold a bow and I couldn't move my arm at all, really. And it's really been like by degrees managing to get function back into my elbow. So that was pretty hard going. But everyone's experience of learning to play is different, and I think it's okay if the road you have isn't conventional. But it was difficult. It's like it feels like a big part of you isn't there anymore, which is tricky.
And how did you? What was the reaction of teachers and your friends when you told them about what happened? I mean, you mentioned that your friends were incredibly supportive, but what about teachers and what about the Royal College? I mean, that must have been really hard for you to have to say to them, you know, I was about to start this master's, but now no, that's not happening. You know, what? How did you communicate it? Was it really difficult, or?
I've been really lucky with that, I think. Well, as far as like I haven't come, everyone's just been really keen to hear how it's going, and I've had just like I've been able to regularly update people on how it's going in college. And I think, and also like my teacher from academy, Ben Hughes, he's been incredibly supportive and kept in touch, and just been ready to teach me whenever I've wanted, as in just to help me get started again. So that was amazing. And college has been great. They've offered alternatives, like doing a 3-year master's instead of 2 years, which has been great, because I might need that time depending on how extra surgeries and things turn out.
Yeah.
And I think but the thing is, I think it's just like really trying to keep open lines of communication, because I think it's really hard for them to support us as students if we can't find if it feels too hard to communicate exactly what's happened, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Because once you write something down, like once you've told people, you write things down of like something really awful that's happened, it can sometimes bring it home a bit. And it's really important to be able to, even when it feels really hard, like try and keep those emails going.
Yeah.
And my friends were just amazing. Because it was my flatmates were great. They just were really supportive about everything, and you know, came to see me in hospital. And my best friend Olivia, she's been great. She's a cellist as well, which I think helped me a lot because she can understand how difficult it would be. And I just feel so lucky for the people around me, because everyone was there just straight away. Olivia was actually there like when I came in the ambulance and went into my first surgery, emergency surgery. So it was kind of probably quite dramatic for her as well. But I think, I just I can't believe how lucky I am with the people around. And I didn't really expect that, as far as it just seems like quite a lot to ask when you sign up for living with someone, you don't necessarily sign up for them then becoming almost disabled, as far as being able to do things for at least a few months. So my flatmates were incredible, supportive people.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I mean, I suppose you must have such empathy as a musician, and especially a cellist, to be able to watch, you know, your best friend go through something that you could never imagine you having to go through. You know what I mean? That is really probably really traumatic, as much for them as for you, to think you know exactly what it would mean not to play. What would it mean, you know, not to have the master's year that I'd planned and had all these sort of ideas of how your life was going to go. But I was wondering kind of what sustained you through the period of healing and recovering. What things did you look to other than music? Or
I had so my dad died in first year, which after 2 years of having a lot of operations and being very unwell. And I think having that example set for me when I was 20 kind of really showed me how brave you could be if you, I don't know, with him, he just kept trying. And he also read a lot and really delved into a lot of literature when he felt ill, because it's something that you can do no matter what happens. You can usually hold a book. So for me, like, a lot of reading really was really kind of an escape from things, and reading. And I started doing some embroidery, which is a bit random, but it was just like anything that felt like you could have like small projects and small challenges that you could face and meet, which that helped a lot, and doing something creative. But mostly reading is kind of my thing.
Yeah, that's so lovely, because it's something that, you know, I think a lot of people have all these books they say they're going to read. Well, I'm talking, you know, about myself, and I suppose you never find the time, or you always find a reason why not. What about writing? Because you are right-handed, I'm guessing, and your injury is on your right hand. So how's writing been? Have you managed to write with your left hand?
Yeah, I learned to do that when I was in hospital, actually, because I felt like it was a good first step. So I was like, some of my friends brought me left-handed pens and like children's writing books to practice, and that was really good to get under my belt, because otherwise it's another thing that you can't quite manage. So that was good to get started with that, and it was quite a good challenge. Now I can write with both hands.
That's so cool. So, with the cello, did you do anything with your left hand when your right hand wasn't available, or did you just sort of think, no, I don't really want to do this right now, it's too painful or it's too difficult? Did you just sort of leave it all together, or did you do some sort of left hand finger work or anything like that?
Well, when it first happened, I was like, you know what, I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to have the best left hand shape ever. It's going to be great. I'm going to be like a master of thumb position by the end of however long this takes. But I haven't done any of that at all, actually. For me, I just couldn't really face doing more than my once every couple of weeks. Because everyday life tasks were quite challenging. Because I actually had a skin graft taken from one of my legs. So first was really learning to walk again properly was kind of a big one. So I kind of focus more on smaller steps as far as getting everyday jobs back to being able to do those, because learning to use your left hand was more challenging than I expected, as far as everything, to like from buttons and zips to like washing up, and it sounds very kind of boring stuff, but that was already enough of a challenge without me trying to also then become the master of like technique on the cello.
I don't know why that kind of crossed my mind. I suppose that would be the thing
for me
you'd
as well.
Because I don't know, why should you have to keep it going? Like, why should you be expected after such a traumatic thing to happen to, you know, I suppose everyone would have that pressure on themselves. Oh, well, I can still use my left hand, so I can still keep going. But it's actually like, no, the whole body is affected. It's a massive mind-body traumatic experience. You know, it's not as easy as just plucking away a bit. Like, that must have been strange. And I want to ask as well about the period of time you spent working in the nursery. Did you kind of introduce yourself there as like a sort of new person with sort of a new vision, and did you leave the cello kind of out of your mind and think of starting new, or how did that work out for you?
It was interesting. I didn't do it for so long because of the coronavirus. Kind of interrupted that.
Okay.
But I actually started off. So I now have, well, when term starts again, I actually teach ballet. As I do a ballet class, which I teach 5-year-olds, so it's not anything crazy. But that was kind of part of my nursery job, and then at another dance school. And that was interesting because I actually had to rely on who I was completely without any kind of working towards being a professional cellist. Doing ballet classes and doing an interview to be a ballet teacher when I hadn't done any ballet in about 10 years was really interesting. It was good to see how much you can kind of blag things sometimes, and then just like look it all up afterwards. So that was good for me to realize that I can get along the world without the cello if I have to. But the ballet teaching was really good. The nursery school teaching was really tiring. But the thing that was nice was having that as part of it, to teaching kids to listen to music and enjoy dancing, because everyone can dance.
Yeah.
Like that was really lovely as like my creative output kind of thing for a while. But teaching a nursery is a lot harder work than I thought it would be. They're very sweet though, usually.
So when you had started that job, was it always your intention, from the time you started, that you would, eventually move on to, playing the cello again and then hopefully starting your masters again? Or did you start there thinking, oh, maybe this is a new life for me, maybe I want to be a dance teacher instead?
Well, I definitely will never be able to be a proper dance teacher. I think I will always just be an assistant part-time type, because I'm not that good at dancing at all. But it was interesting to do. And I think I went in with the idea that teaching in a nursery and working with very young children, it wasn't just to pass the time thing. It was to kind of explore whether that was something that I would look into doing if I couldn't play again. And that meant that when I was there and I was working there, I felt like it gave me an opportunity to see what my life could be like doing something completely different, and just how like the different types of hard work that there are in the world, if that makes sense. Like how amazing people are to do these like really long days, and with amazing amounts of patience. Because the class that I worked in was 4 years and under, and just like being there to teach children things like being kind to each other and their beginnings was really nice, and it was really different compared to always being focused on trying to improve and perfect. It was a very different place to be for a while, and if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. I just kind of now want to talk a bit about the impact of your injury on the way that you've seen the world. And first of all, by asking if there's anything you'd like another person with an injury to know about how it's impacted you and what you've learned. Is there anything you would say to somebody?
I think staying hopeful is really important. When things aren't looking so good, just like trying to just focus on one step at a time and taking the slow days when they come, and just like not beating yourself up because it's not your fault, it just happens. It's just part of the patchwork of everyone's lives. All works out not quite how we imagine sometimes. So I think just like keeping your chin up, and if you're having a hard time, just speaking, communicating is really important. Talking to people around you, and equally, if you're there and you're happy to open up about things that you've found difficult, if you have an injury and you're having a bad day, then it'd be amazing how much people around you might then open up about their difficulties, which might be completely different. They might not be physical challenges, they could be like mental health or family or anything. Like if you let yourself be vulnerable around other people, then sometimes you can help them in return, if that makes sense. I think I would say that.
No, because it's true, I suppose, in the sense that a lot of the time we feel alone, maybe because we put ourselves in a box of maybe how much we suffer in comparison to others. But I think every life will have, maybe not the same kinds of adversity, but definitely everyone will have suffered or will suffer on a level at which they can understand how it feels to feel broken, how it feels to feel like things at the end of the world.
Everyone's cried.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And I think sometimes I've found in the music profession that when I've opened up to people, older people, I don't know why, but sometimes it's felt like they found it a bit awkward or embarrassing. I don't know whether that's because most of my problems have been with mental health, and there's obviously still a big stigma with that. Yeah, I found with my peer group, that was where the strength came from most of all. Of course, I did have very supportive teachers, but the
Mhm.
strength was from the people at the same stage of life as me and who respected. It's seeing, isn't it, that you are respected as a human being for your personality and for the person you are, and not the instrument you play, not the mark you get in your exam. And
Mhm.
I think you've explained that really, really well, actually.
Yeah, I think that sometimes like because we're a different generation to frequently our teachers, with a teacher there's it's a very distinctive thing, isn't it? Like I think often there's a fear of becoming too close to pupils, like having too much of an insight into their mental health, and mental
Mm,
health maybe being too close to their personal life for a teacher to feel comfortable. And it's
yeah,
sometimes that can feel like a judgment rather than maybe a worry from a teacher's point
it's a
of
good
view,
point. Yeah,
if you see what I mean. Like,
yeah.
and it may come out as like a coldness, maybe even, but it probably isn't really meant like that. But it's just that inability to communicate can sometimes be there, can't it? And
Yeah,
that can feel that can find like can feel really difficult if you've opened up about something to your mentor, kind of thing. I think as well, like people our age are getting a lot better at talking about these things and understanding each other a lot better, maybe. um,
yeah,
yeah, like this happening, like you having a podcast, which like is exploring things that people feel every day often, and difficulties that we've all will have in our lives at some point, most probably.
mm,
But just being able to talk about it is a really big step, I think.
yeah. And I mean, people like you having the courage to come forward and share, I think is something that is really hard to do, and people don't realize what it takes to be able to put something of yourself out there, put your story out there. You know, our story is such a personal thing to us. I'm just wondering, I ask this question a lot actually, but if you now went back to, say, first or second year of your undergrad, and
Mm.
as the person you are now and being through everything, is there anything you would have done differently? You know, is there anything that you, wish, oh my goodness, why on earth did I worry about that now? Like now knowing how it's all been and how much you've learnt through your injury and everything.
Oh, that's a really difficult question.
Yeah.
I think being more calm about when things don't work or don't go as I'd hoped, as far as performance mostly. I think if I could have felt a bit more calm, and a bit more understanding that it will be okay. And well, actually, I think it's really difficult from my perspective to think about it now, because that kind of few years for me wasn't that easy because of my dad
Mm.
um passing away. And I think I wish I could say like just be a bit more calm about the whole thing, and just doing your best is enough, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. Like if you're even getting into a practice room for 10 minutes, or
Yes.
managing to do chamber music and explore chamber music with people instead of your individual practice, like anything you can do just to like kind of keep the ball rolling while you pick yourself up again
That's
is
such a
really
good
great,
point.
I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
I so with you there, because there are days where you can't face being alone in a
Mm-hmm.
practice room. It's a, you know, if you recontextualize it, anyone being alone in a room sometimes can be quite an emotional space, you know, and we do expect of ourselves to be in that situation so often. And when you're going through a hard time, all those emotions are amplified. And I think that's so
Exactly.
lovely to say, you know, you can let yourself off and do it differently, be with friends, play in a different context.
Yeah, like the focus doesn't have to be always about the individual ability at that point, like our own individual ability. If you're having a really hard time with mental health or physical injuries, then you can find your way through on a different path, which is okay, because no one's like, none of the amazing musicians we see, they've probably all had those days as well. And it's just finding your way through them and communicating. Like playing with others is just such a gift. That sounds very cliche, but it really is. Like
Yeah.
communicating with other people, um, is just amazing. and it can really give you a lift. And
similarly, even if something like what happened to you happens, people aren't only there for you in a musical context. You know, you aren't only
absolutely
Laura in a piano trio. You're also, you know, your friends are, I'm sure, you know, for everybody, your close friends, whether you play with them or not, are there for you. And I think I've had a hard time realising that as well, actually.
Yeah.
Because you want them to
that
see
you're
the best side.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody is going to be just so inspired and touched by your story, because, I mean, the two things together of dealing with, first of all, grief, and then dealing almost with another type of grief is, to me, just really intensely emotional to think about. And I don't know, were they similar in any way? Was it a similar kind of grief? One for your cello, one for your dad?
Well, I think it was similar in a way, as far as something that I loved wasn't there anymore, and compared to someone. So I think I hadn't realised how much playing had really like guided me through my grief from my dad dying. I think I hadn't really realised how that focus in my life had really like pulled me through. So then having that taken away, I was kind of like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is just beyond a joke. Like, kind of feeling like I'd got myself back on track after working through some of that. But at the same time, it made me realise just like people are so much more important. Obviously, it sounds obvious, but it's just the person missing someone who you love is just so much more, and the fact that you can't see it in someone's like physicalness, you can't see what they're going through, like if they've lost someone or if they're having a really, you know, really bad difficulty with mental health. You can't see it physically, and the help that I've had has been amazing because of it being easier for people to almost deal with. It's like, you can see I have a non-functioning arm, if you see what I mean. I think institutions find it harder to support people with mental health than with physical health.
Yes.
My dad dying is just so much. It just was like a huge thing to happen, and this was really big as well. But this kind of wasn't as big at all, and this has got a lot of hope involved in it, being physically injured compared to losing someone you love. And I think that distinction isn't necessarily supported. Like, we're supported in the same way for very different things often by institutions, because if you can write it down on a piece of paper, and like I've had so much support from the hospital and doctors, and I just feel like I have a whole team of people who are behind me, like kind of wishing me to do well, which is amazing. But I think that type of support is really hard to find when you're feeling bad about losing people, or do you see what I mean? I don't know.
Because I think people don't know how to go there with grief. You know, how can you start talking about it, I suppose, is for a lot of people a very difficult thing to be able to do, because everyone is faced with it at some point. But I suppose not many people are faced with it at the age of 20. You know,
yes, it is. Yeah, it's an unusual one.
It must have been really hard.
It's hard. Yeah, but I think it's a similar thing, that when the times that I did manage to open up about how I felt, which was a lot less after my dad died, than now. Again, like, people really, you don't know what people are going through in their everyday lives. You really don't. And then being vulnerable and being able to speak about things can make a huge difference to them as well as you. It doesn't have to feel like a selfish thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
No, it's true. Giving someone the space to help you, I suppose, or be there for you.
Definitely.
Yeah, can mean a lot to them as well. And I think we underestimate the power that allowing someone in can have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of want to end it there, because I think that's just so lovely. And you've given us just so much amazing inspiration, and thank you so much for everything, and for opening up in the way you have.
Well, thank you for speaking to me. It's been nice to chat.